Well, with me now, presuming you are still in Ottawa, there, Andrew Lawton, Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton, just fresh out of the Justice Committee this morning with, picking up the conversation on C-9. Andrew, what just happened? Break it down for us, if you would.
Well, so this was the culmination, we were told, of what the Liberals claim was wide consultation with Canadians concerned about the erosion of religious freedom and freedom of expression in Bill C-9. We were told that the minister, the government, they were listening to the problems, they were aware of this, they were going to come to a solution. And what they told to a lot of faith leaders and other groups was that they were going to introduce language into the criminal code to make it crystal clear that Bill C-9 and specifically the removal of the religious defense would not infringe on religious freedom. What they presented today was not at all that. They presented this wordplay that maintains the status quo, that basically says you can't be charged with willful promotion of hatred if you were speaking and what you were saying was in the public interest or rooted in religion or science or research, unless you were willfully promoting hate. So they're actually not dealing with the real question, which was, can this new definition of hate be weaponized against people for expressing good faith religious convictions or citing religious texts? And their logic was incredibly circular. The language they provided was circular. And all they're really saying is that, well, you already have constitutional freedom of religion. Nothing in this bill will change it, and nothing in this amendment will change it. To which I say, okay, then what's the point? Why are you trying to put this forward? So when they put this to us on committee, we were very clear that this does not actually deal with the religious freedom and civil liberties issues in Bill C-9. It certainly doesn't deal with the concerns that came about with the removal of the religious defense, which was a specific carve out that said you could not be charged with willfully promoting hate if you were expressing a good faith religious belief. Now they're saying you can be charged if you're doing that, but they aren't defining what that is and providing anything resembling a safeguard against that crime being used for people that wade into contentious social, moral, political arguments. And I'll just say, if I may, Faitine, the backdrop of this meeting was very interesting because just a few days ago, you had the BC Human Rights Tribunal rule against Barry Neufeld, a school trustee in Chilliwack. And a lot of what he was saying, and by the way, I'm not endorsing the totality of what he said. There's a lot that he said that I do think is actually harmful to people's emotions and feelings. But they were using the same type of law at the Human Rights Tribunal level in that case, this idea of hate. And now we are seeing a lower threshold in Bill C-9 and a removal of protections that are meant to actually safeguard religious conviction and political viewpoints.
Yeah, and that was extreme, that ruling, $750,000. That's a house in most parts of Canada. And so not an inconsequential, $5,000 or $500 slap on the wrist type fine here. Like that was massive. Now, there were two things that kept being said, this morning that I was like, okay, could somebody please explain that? Willful. What does the word willful mean? Who defines the threshold of what is not willful, just sort of a discussion, a dialogue in good faith, and what is willful hate towards an identifiable group? What is hate, right? Of course, this is one of the things you've been flagging, that, and Roman Baber, Christine Van Guy, and other lawyers across the nation have been flagging this problematic redefinition of the word hate to make it much more broad, much more subjective, much more weaponizable, possibly by the courts. You put those two things together. And the whole thing about the identifiable group as well, I think about the Barry Neufeld case. This is a situation of an identifiable group. So you have a group of Canadians that maybe don't adhere to the biblical definitions of sexuality. Barry Neufeld brings his opinion forward on that. It is deemed by the BC Human Rights Tribunal to be hateful. $750,000 fine. So talk to us about the ambiguity of these terms.
Yeah, so willful promotion of hate is just the name of the criminal code charge that really deals with what we would kind of colloquially characterize as hate speech. Now, why that's important to have in its own category there is because we have separate criminal code offenses when it comes to incitement to violence, when it comes to promotion of genocide, when it comes to threats. These are all things that have their own definitions. So when we talk about willful promotion of hatred, we're really just talking about the government's view of whether you are saying something, uttering something into existence that is promoting hate against a particular group, whether that's on lines of race, of gender, of sexuality, of religion, all of these things. But why it's so important to deal with at this level right now on committee with Bill C-9 is that Bill C-9 changes the definition of hate, and it lowers a threshold that has really been fine-tuned over many decades by the Supreme Court that maintains a very high bar, with the understanding that you can actually have your feelings hurt and not have a criminal charge laid against the person who hurt them in Canada. You actually do not have a right to not have your feelings hurt, to not be offended, to not be humiliated, discredited. These are some of the words in the Supreme Court's ruling. But what the law is now going to have is a lower threshold. And when you have cases that are really near the edge, that are near the line, and, for example, to use that BC Human Rights Tribunal case, there were several statements that the tribunal said these meet the definition of hate. There were some that they said these don't meet that definition, but they were saying they came close. So in edge cases, it's actually very important to have very clear direction to law enforcement and to the courts, and not end up in a situation where we're capturing more speech in a society that should value, and I think needs to value, freedom of expression. So this is where I go back to the importance of having this debate in a way that doesn't even take a position on individual issues. It's simply to say that government should not be the arbiter of which scriptures you can cite and how you can express your religious convictions and your political views. And that was why people were so alarmed by Mark Miller's comments back in October that certain scriptures are inherently illegal and should be inherently should inherently open you up to charges being laid, because there's no way you could even cite those in good faith. That's the attitudes we're up against right now. And it's why we've been so concerned by the Liberal government now, after saying they were consulting with faith communities, coming with a response that basically says the status quo is working, so you don't need to worry.
Right. And continuing to cite the charter, saying, listen, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience is a protected charter right. But then you brought up the obvious of what just happened with the invocation of the Emergencies Act. A few years later, how many thousands of dollars have gone into that court case? How many
billions? I had the number at one point and I've forgotten it, but millions of dollars to defend against that. And even now, I will say that the government has not yet said publicly whether it will appeal the decision or accept the ruling. So we could add even more if they decide to take this to the Supreme Court of Canada, which is their right. But that would also mean that they're still holding to this idea that they did not violate the charter, despite the declaration by both the federal court and now the Federal Court of Appeal that they did.
Okay. And so why this is relevant is because this is a situation where the government said, basically, we are going to run roughshod on charter rights. The courts ruled against them after a few years and said, nope, that was not okay. Now they may appeal it now. And if it does, like you said, millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and also not to mention the cost to those that are trying to defend themselves. So, this is not a nothing burger. And so basically what you've been saying is we do not want to put Canadians, people of faith, whether it's Christians, Jewish Canadians, Hindu Canadians, like any faith expression, those that have a sincerely held faith belief, we do not want to put them in a position where they're having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend their charter rights that the Liberals are currently saying they have. Is that kind of the read on this?
Yeah, and where I think, just to put a fine point on it, Faitine, the reason I brought up the Emergencies Act is because at the time, to justify the charter when they invoked the Emergencies Act just over 4 years ago, what Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and their whole team said was, don't worry, we aren't violating your charter rights because you have the charter to protect your rights. And it was circular at the time, and it still is. And they're using the exact same idea now, where they're saying, don't worry, C-9 won't affect your religious freedom because the charter says you have religious freedom. Well, that doesn't actually do anything, and it may provide a remedy after the fact, but it doesn't deal with the infringement that happens right now if a bill goes forward that makes it easier to charge someone for quoting scripture, for expressing religious views. So that was why I brought up that comparison. And that's why the government's response to this amendment they've put forward today, which is still live before the Justice Committee, is one that really amounts to just gaslighting Canadians. They're saying that we have nothing to fear, so we should just shut up. And at the same time, they're saying that this amendment won't change anything because they believe that the protections needed already exist in law, despite the removal of the religious defense. So they're saying two contradictory things at once here about the religious defense and about their amendment. They're saying with the religious defense that removing it doesn't change anything because we already have religious freedom, but they're also saying it was important to remove it. And then they're saying about the amendment's important for protecting religious freedom, but at the same time, it doesn't matter because you already have it. So they're trying to appeal to these like two contradictory ideas. And I had to, on the committee meeting, call them out on that.
Yeah, and so you can kind of read where this is going. So right now, through our organization, through For My Canada, I am so proud of our network, Andrew. I really am. 50,000, almost 51,000 phone calls registered right now. And that's just through our portal with For My Canada. That's not to mention all the other amazing groups that are weighing into this, other faiths. You know, I
just individuals, people that have just organically called up their MP's office, not connected to this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would not be a stretch to say that it is possible that our elected officials have had over 100,000 phone calls on just this one issue over the last month and a half. And so, but, you know, Canadians are going to continue to call. And so this is what I would expect based on what just happened today is that, you know, Sally Smith, she's going to call up the next member of parliament on the list and she's going to express her concerns and they're going to bounce back and say, Mrs. Smith, you have nothing to worry about. We're taking care of this. Those conservatives, they're just trying to scare you. They're just trying to raise an alarm. They're just politicizing this. They're just being obstructionist. That's kind of what the talking point's probably going to be when they call. So what do you say back to Mrs. Smith when she greets that narrative on the phone today?
So I think the key thing is that if the existing law already protects this, why was it so important to remove the religious defense? That would be the first question I'd ask. If you believe that it makes no difference, why did it need to be changed? And if it makes no difference, why not just put it back in? And the second point I'd raise is how this amendment can protect religious freedom when it doesn't actually protect religious expression from being categorized as hateful. Because that's the issue here, is that people of faith are not looking for a license to hate. They're looking for a clear declaration that the government will not erroneously apply this label, which again is becoming more murky with changes in C-9 to good faith religious expression. And neither of those has really been answered for in what's happening. And I will just say, like, I know one Liberal MP was trying to like blame me for orchestrating all your efforts and being the ringleader of this. This has been an entirely grassroots effort. And I have to commend you, Fatine, and your volunteers who have stepped up. I mean, we put the information out there, but it's ordinary Canadians that are concerned about this that take that up. And I don't know if it ever got back to you, but whenever I mentioned you and your efforts at, you know, town halls and rallies, I would always say the same thing, which is, you know, how simultaneously impressed I am and also how desperately fearful I am to ever end up on your bad side, seeing what you're capable of. So I think it's a good tool to keep people honest, knowing that there are so many people willing to call their MP's office, as they should be, and say when something is just unacceptable and shouldn't go forward.
Yeah, and for any Liberal or anybody that's watching, just so y'all know, for the record, Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton did not put For My Canada up to our campaign. That was all us. That was all us. And so just to say that. Okay, so where are we at right now? Let's break it down a little bit. And so the Liberals put forward an amendment that they wanted y'all to vote on. This is where the back and forth was about. And then so basically they're trying to say, hey, nothing to see here. Is everything okay? But not actually repealing the amendment that was put forward before the Christmas break. You countered with another amendment. They didn't have the text, or you didn't have the text for
so it's called it's called a sub amendment. So it's amending their amendment.
Okay.
Because one of the really concerning parts of it was that as I said, it was circular. So it had this line in it where it said you can't be charged for willfully promoting hatred if you're doing this stuff unless you're willfully promoting hatred. So I said, let's just remove that last line. Let's actually have the protections that good faith expressions in the public interest, for scientific and educational purpose, for religious expression is not willfully promoting hate. So my amendment will, I believe, provide something closer to what we need to see as a strong, robust defense. Again, a sub-amendment you have to sort of introduce in real time. You have to adapt to what's on the floor. So this is at the end of the meeting, the chair said he needed to review it. And because the Liberals are trying to say that this sub-amendment should not be allowed. They're actually saying it shouldn't just be voted down, but it actually should not be allowed to even be discussed. So when we pick up on Wednesday, that will be the first thing that's addressed is will this sub-amendment of mine be found in scope, it's called, as in, basically receivable by the committee to debate and discuss. And if so, again, we still have a lot of lingering issues in Bill C-9, but we're trying to minimize the harms as much as we can as this bill is going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important to continue to accent that, because even if this amendment that was put forward before the Christmas break is pulled, there are still other problematic elements to this bill. Something that was happening simultaneously to the committee meeting this morning, Andrew, I don't know if you knew this, but there is actually a court case that is playing out in real time right now in Quebec. There was a gathering a few years ago, a pro-life reconciliation, or it was actually a reconciliation gathering being held by a charity that in the past has been overtly pro-life in their stances. The Quebec provincial government shut it down. That case was in the courts today. I believe the JCCF is representing the charity at hand. But I was, getting some tweets from people that were live in the courtroom, Andrew, and they were saying that it seemed like the judge had no real understanding of faith or religion or what even the gospel is. And so the individuals who were giving witness to, why a gathering like this is a legitimate faith-based expression, they actually had to explain just the basics of the gospel of the Christian faith. And it's such an interesting dynamic, because here you have, millions of Canadians who are at the mercy of these courts, where some of the judges, some of the people that are administrating seem to just not even have a base level of understanding, which creates a real vulnerability, right, with some of this stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that's playing out in real time. Is there anything else that you feel is really important to highlight from the discourse this morning, Andrew?
I think that it's not over until it's over. And this is, I think, key. I think the Liberals expected that they would be able to, well, I think back in December, they expected we would be able to just wave this through quickly without any scrutiny at all. I don't think they were expecting the pushback that they've had over the winter. As you and I have talked about in the past, I think the number of weird delays, canceled meetings, adjourned meetings, all of that has been a consequence of the Liberals feeling very vulnerable on this. It isn't just Christians. It's the Muslim community. It's the Orthodox Jewish community. It's Sikh and Hindu and Buddhist people. Like, the concerns have been coming from all over the place, including from the Liberal caucus. So I think it's important that people keep up the pressure. And I think it's also important that we really tell them right now that protecting religious freedom doesn't mean gaslighting us into thinking that there isn't a religious freedom issue that is being created by Bill C-9 in its current form.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is keep the pressure on. Wednesday morning is caucus morning for all the different parties. It would be amazing if they had like another 50,000 phone calls tomorrow going into that caucus meeting. Anyway, that's just my own personal, wish right there. Keep the pressure on. Next week, I am told, is a constituency week again. So be having those in-person contacts with your own member of parliament, but those members of parliament that have the most power right now are the Liberals and the Bloc. Now, you did mention, or was it you or somebody else mentioned, that there are some Liberal members of parliament that have expressed deep concern, right, about C-9. So this isn't just that the Conservatives are expressing concern. Anything that you want to weigh into in that regard?
No, I've had some conversations with Liberal MPs privately. Some have been a little bit more public in expressing their concern. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I think it's important that they also be supported in this if they're prepared to do the right thing, even if it means going against their party.
Okay. Well, hey, Andrew, I am looking in our comments here because we are doing this in real time. And wow, look at all this. Everybody. Yeah, that's right. Here we go. Watching from Saskatchewan. Keep up the fight. There you go. Standing for us all. Oh, man. You've got a lot of, you got a big fan club here. Oh no, there's a couple I probably won't put up here. Okay, anyway, there's okay. How do I remove these now? I don't even know how to get this one down. This is where I need an IT person. Okay, so
that's all. I'm the free speech guy, so I say leave it up. Don't worry.
I can't even. Here we go. That's right. Watching from Saskatchewan. Here we go. I can't find the one that's actually highlighted here. So anyway, everybody. So thank you so much for watching, for tuning in spontaneously here. We got a lot of eyeballs on this. I'm sure. Like, share this with your friends, with your like-minded loved ones. I want to also remind everybody to go to our website right here. Okay, that's one way to get the comments down. Go to our website, formycanada.com. Right on the top of the website, we've got our call list. This was provided by us, not by Andrew Lawton, by us with For My Canada. We are targeting some of the Liberal members of Parliament that'll most likely be softer, more open on these issues. And then we're kind of working it back from there. Make sure you contact your own member of Parliament, every single Conservative member of Parliament, everybody who's going to vote against this. We need their votes to be present if this does go back to third reading. It could die in committee though, right, Andrew? Like if the Liberals...
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different outcomes that could happen here. We have asked for, we have proposed that the Liberals can split the bill up and actually introduce a new bill with some of the sections that we think are agreeable, that there are no issues with, and green light those, and then deal with the problematic stuff or let it wither. I mean, there are a number of options available if the Liberals were truly interested in a collaborative approach on this.
Okay, great. Well, hey, final word to you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. We really appreciate how accessible you've been. But final word for you, for everybody who's tuning in here.
Just thank you. It's very difficult to take up a challenge like this without people in the real world that believe in this and are truly there. And we're doing this to represent you. So your voice on this is paramount. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Make sure you swing by For My Canada. Make some phone calls today. Let's just light up the phone lines before caucus on Wednesday morning, and we'll be watching you. And I just want to say this. I said this before we went live, but Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton just gave Canada a masterclass on real-time brilliance. So if you did not watch the Conservative or the Justice Committee live this morning, you got to go back and watch Andrew Lawton in action in real time. It was very, very impressive. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Andrew.
Thank you.